BuzzFeed. Unsolved mysteries have haunted the internet for years, full of chilling stories and questions that never got answered. But now, 6 of the most infamous cases have finally been solved. Thanks to modern forensics, relentless detective work, and a little bit of luck, the truth has been uncovered, the twists exposed, and names have finally been given back to the victims. And if you've never heard these stories before, stick around. We're diving into some of the most shocking mysteries you've probably never seen. For starters, we're heading to the heart of Los Angeles, California, to the infamous Cecil Hotel, a building with a dark, disturbing history that has been the backdrop for numerous deaths, disappearances, and criminal investigations. It was January 2013 when Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from British Columbia, checked into the hotel during a solo trip along the West Coast. Elisa was bright, adventurous, and always in touch with her family, documenting her journey on a personal blog where she shared her daily experiences, thoughts, and travel plans. She seemed like any other young traveler exploring a new city, unaware of the tragic path that awaited her. Initially, Elisa was placed in a shared hostel-style room, but her roommates reported odd behavior that frightened them. They mentioned her leaving strange notes, acting unpredictably, and sometimes retreating to corners of the room as if hiding. Because of these incidents, hotel staff relocated her to a private room, a decision meant to protect both Elisa and the other guests. Everything appeared manageable at first, but the night of January 31st would mark the beginning of one of the most baffling and widely speculated cases in recent years. On that day, Elisa disappeared. Her daily calls and messages to her parents suddenly stopped, prompting immediate concern and involvement from the Los Angeles Police Department. The initial search included the hotel rooms, hallways, and rooftop, with K-9 units assisting in tracking her scent. Despite their efforts, there was no immediate trace of her. For 2 agonizing weeks, the case remained shrouded in uncertainty until February 13th, when the LAPD released the last known footage of Elisa inside the hotel. The video, captured in one of the elevators, was grainy but chilling. It showed her entering the elevator, pressing multiple buttons, then stepping back into the hallway as though she was checking for someone. She darted back and forth, pressed herself into a corner, and gestured with her hands as though communicating with an unseen presence. Then she disappeared from view, and the elevator doors, which had been stuck open, suddenly closed and resumed normal function. The footage immediately went viral, sparking an outpouring of theories across the internet. Viewers speculated about supernatural activity, believing Elisa was haunted by ghosts rumored to inhabit the Cecil. Others suggested she was participating in the elevator game, a popular urban legend claiming that pressing elevator buttons in a specific sequence could transport players to another dimension. The mysterious gestures and erratic movements were analyzed frame by frame, with countless theories proliferating online, feeding the narrative of a haunted hotel and a possibly paranormal disappearance. Complicating matters further, guests reported foul-smelling black water and low water pressure, which only amplified the idea that the hotel was cursed or involved in sinister activity. On February 19th, a maintenance worker named Santiago Lopez climbed a ladder to inspect the hotel's massive water tanks on the roof, expecting a routine check. Instead, he encountered the unthinkable. Elisa Lam's body was found floating in one of the tanks, completely submerged, with her clothes beside her in the water. The discovery intensified the speculation. How could she have accessed the rooftop, entered the water tank, and managed to close it behind herself? At first glance, it seemed like a murder or a paranormal event had occurred. However, the official coroner's report would eventually provide a sobering and tragic explanation. Elisa's death was ruled an accidental drowning, and it was revealed that she had a significant history of bipolar disorder, a condition that had been diagnosed and treated with multiple medications. At the time of her death, she was under medicating, which contributed to severe psychotic episodes, paranoia, and hallucinations. The elevator video, once seen as evidence of a haunting or a mysterious game, was now understood as a terrifying manifestation of a manic episode. She had been acting out of fear, confusion, and a distorted perception of reality, with her gestures and movements reflecting the chaos in her mind. The logistics of her tragic death were also clarified. While the main rooftop door was locked, there was an alternate route accessible through a fire escape connected to one of the hotel windows, bypassing alarms entirely. Police K-9 units had tracked her scent to this window, confirming that she had accessed the roof independently. The tank itself, which had been thought impossible to enter alone, was actually uncovered when she climbed in. During her psychotic state, she likely sought refuge in the water tank, believing it to be a safe hiding place, only to tragically drown when she could not escape. Elisa's story is heartbreaking precisely because it dispels myths and conspiracies, replacing them with a devastatingly human explanation. There were no ghosts, no interdimensional travel, no sinister third parties involved. There was only a young woman struggling with a severe mental health condition, whose reality became unbearably distorted in a place already steeped in darkness. Her family has since spoken publicly, emphasizing the importance of understanding mental health and the tragedy of untreated or improperly managed conditions. While the Cecil Hotel itself continues to be a location with a notorious reputation, Elisa Lam's case is now definitively solved. The mystery that captivated the internet, generated countless theories, and terrified viewers worldwide has a clear and factual explanation. Her story, though tragic, stands as a sobering reminder of the real dangers posed by mental illness and the importance of compassion, awareness, and support for those struggling with such conditions. No longer the subject of paranormal speculation, Elisa's story is a human tragedy, fully understood and finally closed. For our next stop, we're diving into a real-life treasure hunt that became an obsession, a challenge, and for some, a deadly adventure. This is the story of the Forest Fenn treasure. Around 2010, Forest Fenn, an eccentric 80-year-old art dealer, decided to turn his wealth and creativity into a puzzle. He took a centuries-old bronze chest, filled it with gold nuggets, rare coins, gemstones, and priceless artifacts, worth millions, and hid it somewhere deep in the Rocky Mountains, a wilderness stretching over 3,000 meters from New Mexico into Canada. To lead seekers to the prize, Fenn wrote a cryptic 24-line poem and published it in his memoir. He promised that the poem contained 9 exact clues that, when correctly interpreted, would reveal the location of the chest. His goal wasn't just treasure, it was to inspire adventure and get people outside, exploring the natural world. What he didn't expect was just how far people would take it. The poem sparked a frenzy. Tens of thousands of treasure hunters, from casual puzzle lovers to dedicated enthusiasts, scoured the Rockies. They quit jobs, drained savings, and spent years decoding every line of Fenn's poem. Online communities erupted with debates, theories, and detailed breakdowns of every syllable. It was a dream for puzzle lovers, but the quest quickly became dangerous. The Rocky Mountains are harsh, remote, and unforgiving. And danger wasn't just theoretical. At least 5 people died while searching. In 2016, Randy Bilu went missing in New Mexico, his remains found months later. In 2017, Jeff Murphy fell 500 feet in Yellowstone National Park. That same year, Pastor Paris Wallace was swept away by the Rio Grande, and Eric Ashby's body was recovered from the Arkansas River. Finally, in March 2020, Michael Sexton was found dead after an unsuccessful search. These tragedies raised alarms, and even the New Mexico State Police publicly urged Fenn to end the hunt, warning that lives were at stake. For years, many wondered if the treasure was even real or just an elaborate riddle from a wealthy old man. Then, on June 6, 2020, Fenn confirmed it. The chest had been found. He described it as resting under the stars in a forested section of the Rockies, exactly where he had hidden it more than a decade earlier. The discoverer's identity, however, remained a secret. Fenn passed away a few months later, leaving the details intentionally vague to protect the finder from unwanted attention. Months later, in December 2020, the mystery finally lifted. The finder revealed himself, Jack Stoof, a 32-year-old medical student from Michigan. He had spent 2 intense years solving Fenn's 9 clues, meticulously decoding the poem rather than wandering aimlessly through the mountains. His discovery wasn't luck, it was careful observation, logic, and determination. He traveled to the location, followed the poem's directions to the letter, and opened the chest exactly where Fenn had hidden it. Photographs of the glittering contents ended all speculation. The treasure was real, the puzzle solvable, and after a decade of obsession, the great American treasure hunt had reached its conclusion. In this next case, we head to the remote wilderness above Lake Tahoe, Nevada, a place of tall trees, winding trails, and breathtaking views. But in 1982, this peaceful setting became the site of a mystery that would stay unsolved for decades. Hikers at Sheep's Flat stumbled upon a young woman's body off the trail. She had no identification, no personal belongings, just a tragic scene that immediately raised questions about who she was and how she died. She would be called the Sheep's Flat Jane Doe, a name that would stick for more than 36 years. The woman had been brutally murdered. She was shot in the back of the head while bending over, possibly tying her shoes, and sexually assaulted. A men's underwear item had been left over the wound, almost as if to hide the crime. Her casual hiking clothes, a sleeveless light blue shirt, blue jeans, and yellow tennis shoes, did nothing to explain the horror of the scene. Every detail suggested a methodical killer who had carefully planned the attack. Investigators quickly realized they had a difficult case. The coroner estimated her age to be between 25 and 35, standing about 5 feet 5 inches tall and weighing around 112 pounds. She carried no clues to her identity, and no witnesses came forward. The case went cold, leaving detectives and the community haunted by her namelessness. For decades, law enforcement pursued every lead. Missing person reports were scoured nationwide. Was she a runaway, a transient, or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? Nothing matched. Her life was a mystery, and for the world, she was just another Jane Doe, a ghost lost in the wilderness. Everything changed with modern forensic science. In 2018, DNA from the victim was analyzed and entered into genealogical databases. Experts painstakingly traced her family tree, comparing DNA from distant relatives, and slowly, the pieces came together. After years of work, investigators identified her as Mary Edith Silvani, born September 29, 1948, in Detroit, Michigan. At 33 years old, Mary had been living a life unknown to the authorities, but finally she had a name. The identification gave closure, but it also led to the question, who had killed her? Investigators connected her murder to James Richard Curry, a serial killer who had confessed to multiple killings in California before dying in jail in early January 1983. Mary had likely been one of his victims, attacked and left in a remote Nevada trail. Restoring Mary's identity was more than just solving a case. For decades, she had been invisible, her story untold, her life defined by tragedy. Now, Mary Edith Silvani had a name, a place in history, and her life remembered. Her case showed the power of persistence, forensic science, and genealogical research. It reminded everyone that even the coldest, most puzzling mysteries can be solved, and that behind every Jane Doe is a real person with a story worth telling. Next, we travel to the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to a case that has haunted American true crime history for over 6 decades. It is the story of a little boy whose life was brutally stolen and whose image became a symbol of tragedy and injustice. The case of the boy in the box. The story begins on February 25, 1957, when a local man checking his muskrat traps in the wooded area of the Fox Chase neighborhood noticed a large cardboard box. The box sat partially hidden among the underbrush, overlooked by passers-by. A few days later, A curious college student also came across the box, and what he discovered would shock the city and the entire nation for generations to come. Inside the box lay the naked, battered body of a young boy, estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old. He was wrapped in a worn plaid blanket inside a box that had originally been used as packaging from a local department store, J.C. Penney. The child's small body bore clear signs of severe neglect, abuse, and malnutrition. His hair had been crudely chopped, with loose clumps still clinging to his scalp and shoulders. There were scars scattered across his body, some appearing to be the remnants of minor surgical procedures on his ankles and groin, hinting at a history of prolonged medical attention, or possibly neglectful interference. The autopsy determined that the child had died from blunt force trauma, evidence of the immense suffering he endured in his final moments. The discovery sent shockwaves through Philadelphia. The police department immediately launched one of the largest and most extensive investigations in the city's history. Flyers bearing the boy's image were plastered across post offices, schools, and public spaces, totaling over 400,000 distributed copies. The media quickly picked up the story, spreading awareness nationwide. In an unprecedented effort to involve every household, authorities even included flyers and utility bills sent to residents across the city. But despite the extensive outreach, not a single person came forward to identify the boy. It was as if he had been born invisible, a ghost hidden in plain sight. Over the years, the investigation became a decades-long saga, passed from one generation of homicide detectives to the next. Many kept the boy's image on their desks long after retirement, refusing to let his memory fade. Numerous theories and leads emerged but led nowhere. One prominent theory involved a nearby foster home, where a woman known as Martha came forward years later with a chilling story. She claimed that her abusive mother had purchased the boy, subjected him to years of horrific abuse, and ultimately killed him in a fit of rage after he vomited his dinner. Martha alleged that she had been forced to help dump the boy's body in the Fox Chase woods. While some elements seemed plausible, investigators were never able to fully corroborate her story, and it ultimately remained another dead end in a case full of them. Despite these dead ends, investigators refused to give up. The child's small grave at Ivy Hill Cemetery bore the inscription, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy," a quiet testament to the decades of failure and heartbreak surrounding the case. Advances in forensic science, however, offered new hope. By the late 21st century, cold case investigators began revisiting the evidence with modern DNA testing and investigative genealogy, tools that had solved numerous other long-standing mysteries. In 1929, authorities obtained a court order to exhume the boy's remains one final time. This time, they were able to extract a viable DNA sample, opening the door to finally uncovering his identity. The process was painstaking. Investigators uploaded the genetic profile to public DNA databases and began constructing an extensive family tree, meticulously linking him to distant relatives through genealogical research. Every branch, every connection was analyzed, piecing together a complex web of ancestry. Years of persistence, patience, and technical expertise slowly paid off. Incredibly, the team was able to track down living relatives, confirm family lines, and verify records across multiple states. Every lead, every match brought them closer to giving this boy the name he had been denied for more than 65 years. Finally, on December 8, 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department held a press conference that marked the end of a long and emotional journey. The room was silent as the police commissioner stepped forward to announce that the boy's identity had been conclusively established. He was Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born January 13, 1953. Joseph was 4 years old when he was brutally taken from this world, a small life marked by neglect and cruelty, but now acknowledged with dignity and recognition. Through investigative genealogy, authorities were able to identify both of Joseph's parents, providing closure not only for the case itself, but for the generations of detectives, advocates, and family members who had long fought for justice. While the exact circumstances of his death were never fully revealed to the public, out of respect for the living relatives who had never known him, the central mystery, the one that had haunted the nation for decades, was solved. Joseph was no longer the anonymous boy in the box or a faceless symbol of tragedy. He had a name, a birthday, and a story. A stolen life had finally been restored, at least in memory, and a relentless pursuit of justice had triumphed over decades of uncertainty. The identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli stands as a monumental achievement in the realm of cold case investigations, demonstrating the power of modern forensic science and genealogy to give voices back to those silenced by violence and neglect. For over 65 years, he had been nothing more than a tragic enigma. But now, he is Joseph. His name, long denied, is finally his own. This case, without question, is definitively solved, closing one of the most haunting chapters in American true crime history. For our fifth stop, we leave the United States and head to the southern coast of Australia, to a quiet stretch of beach in Adelaide that would become the scene of a decades-long enigma, the case of the Somerton man. This mystery began on December 1st, 1948, when a body was discovered on Somerton Park Beach. The man appeared strikingly ordinary at first glance. Sharply dressed in a suit and tie, he seemed like a businessman who might have dozed off against the seawall and never woken up. But a closer inspection revealed a series of puzzling and sinister anomalies. The man carried no identification. Every tag on his clothing had been meticulously removed. It was as if he had been deliberately stripped of every trace of personal history. The autopsy revealed the cause of death was poisoning, though no known toxic substance could be identified at the time. The sophistication of the unknown poison suggested a highly calculated, almost spy-like murder. Yet the mystery deepened even further when investigators found a small, hidden fob pocket in the man's trousers. Inside was a tiny, tightly rolled slip of paper with only 2 printed words: Tam Shud, which translates from Persian to "It is finished." This cryptic clue was traced to a rare poetry book, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, which the authorities launched a nationwide search to locate. A local man eventually came forward, revealing he had discovered the book tossed in his car near the beach around the time of the death. The final page, containing the Tam Shud slip, was indeed missing. But there was more. On the back of the book were 5 lines of capitalized letters that appeared to be a coded message, along with the unlisted phone number of a local nurse named Jessica Jo Thompson. When questioned, the nurse denied knowing the deceased, though she admitted she had once given a copy of the Rubaiyat to an Army lieutenant named Alfred Boxhall. Police pursued Boxhall, who was very much alive, and examined his book, which still contained the missing page. The trail went cold again, and the Somerton man became a global fascination, a real-life spy thriller without a solution. Theories proliferated, including the idea that he was a Cold War spy, eliminated on Australian soil before completing an important mission. The removed clothing tags, the untraceable poison, and the cryptic message all seemed to support this thrilling yet unprovable theory. For 74 long years, the case remained unresolved, the man buried in a grave marked simply as, "Here lies the unknown man." Enter the 21st century, where forensic science had advanced beyond imagination. Professor Derek Abbott of Adelaide became obsessed with the case, dedicating years to piecing together the man's identity. Abbott tracked down a plaster bust created by police in 1949, which preserved the man's hair and facial structure. Using these strands of hair, he collaborated with American forensic genealogist Colleen Fitzpatrick to extract DNA and build a massive family tree, tracing distant relatives through public genealogical databases. This painstaking work took years. Thousands of names were sifted, distant connections mapped, and each branch of the family tree was meticulously analyzed. Finally, in July 2022, the team made the breakthrough they had been waiting for. The Somerton man was identified as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne, born in 1905. He was 43 years old at the time of his death. Further investigation revealed Webb had been married to a woman named Dorothy, nicknamed Doth, who had relocated to Adelaide. It now appears that Webb may have traveled to the city in search of her, though the reasons for their separation remain unclear. The cryptic code in the book, previously thought to be a spy message, is now believed to have been shorthand for betting on horse races, a hobby Webb was known to enjoy. The identification of Carl Webb did not solve every question surrounding his death, but it restored his identity after more than 7 decades. What had once seemed like an elaborate spy plot was revealed to be the tragic and mysterious death of a man whose life had intersected with extraordinary circumstances. The tale of the Somerton man is a reminder of the extraordinary lengths modern science can go to uncover identity, and how even the most perplexing mysteries can eventually be unraveled with persistence, intelligence, and innovative forensic techniques. While the cause of death remains officially unconfirmed, the central puzzle, the man's identity, is no longer a mystery. After 74 years, Carl Webb's story has been returned to him, his life acknowledged, and the romanticized myths of spies and coded messages replaced by the reality of an ordinary man caught in a tragic and unresolved event. The Somerton man case is a testament to the power of science, persistence, and human curiosity definitively solved and finally at rest. And lastly, we head to the windswept and desolate beaches of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, a place that usually evokes summer vacations and family trips. But on July 26, 1974, it became the stage for one of America's most chilling and perplexing mysteries. Picture this: a 12-year-old girl walking her dog along the dunes on a warm summer day. The dog, seemingly agitated, starts barking wildly and tugs her toward a hidden part of the sandy landscape. There, on a faded green beach blanket, lay a body. But this wasn't just any body. It was a horrifying statement. Every detail of the crime spoke of calculated violence and an intent to erase the victim's identity entirely. The woman, whose auburn hair was tied neatly in a ponytail, lay completely naked. She had suffered a catastrophic blow to the head, a strike so severe it nearly severed her head from her body. But the brutality didn't stop there. Most of her teeth had been removed, her hands were severed at the wrists, and yet there was a disturbing attention to detail. Her remaining possessions, a pair of Wrangler jeans and a folded blue bandana, had been placed carefully under her head like a makeshift pillow. This grotesque mixture of violence and mock tenderness created a chilling scene that would haunt investigators and the public for decades. For 48 years, she remained one of the most famous Jane Does in America. Dubbed the Lady of the Dunes, her identity was a mystery that drew every kind of theory and speculation. Was it Whitey Bulger, the notorious Boston mobster known for extracting teeth from victims? Or Tony Costa, a serial killer who dismembered women in the nearby town of Truro just a few years prior? Even a convicted murderer named Hayden Clark claimed he had done it, boasting in prison that he could have revealed her name but refused out of spite. All these leads ultimately fizzled, leaving the Lady of the Dunes as a ghost haunting the Cape. Over the decades, forensic experts tried every tool at their disposal. Clay reconstructions of her face were commissioned, hoping someone might recognize her. Her body was exhumed 4 separate times in 1980, 2000, 2013, and finally in 2022. As each new scientific advancement promised a breakthrough. Yet every attempt ended in frustration, the mystery remaining impenetrable. Then, on October 31st, 2022, appropriately enough, on Halloween, the FBI announced a breakthrough that finally gave her a name: Ruth Marie Terry, a 37-year-old woman from Tennessee. The mystery of her identity was solved. But the discovery of her name only deepened the questions. Who killed her, and how had they evaded justice for nearly half a century? The answer, shockingly, was someone much closer than anyone had imagined. Her husband, Guy Rockwell Mullivan. Mullivan was no ordinary man. A lifelong predator, his violent tendencies were hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. After Ruth's disappearance during what seemed like a honeymoon trip in 1974, Mullivan returned alone, driving Ruth's car and spinning stories that she had left him after an argument. He maintained this lie until his death from illness in 2002. But his past painted a far darker picture. Investigators uncovered that in 1960, his second wife, Manzanita Ryan, and her young daughter, Dolores, disappeared mysteriously in Seattle. Human remains found later on Mullivan's property were never definitively linked to them, leaving him uncharged. Even earlier, in the 1950s, he had been a suspect in the murder of a truck driver and the kidnapping of the driver's teenage girlfriend, who was never seen again. This was the man Ruth Terry had married. The timeline was damning. Ruth's last known moments were in 1974, and the discovery of her body shortly thereafter aligned with her being a victim of Mullivan's lethal tendencies. Investigators believe he murdered her during the honeymoon, striking her skull, removing her hands and teeth to obscure her identity, and leaving her in the dunes of Provincetown. After nearly 50 years, the full horror of her husband's past and the life she unknowingly entered came to light. On August 28, 2023, the Cape and Islands District Attorney officially named Guy Rockwell Mullivan as Ruth Terry's killer, closing the case once and for all. After decades of unanswered questions, false leads, and public fascination, the ghost of the dunes could finally rest. Ruth was no longer just the lady of the dunes. She was a named woman, a victim whose life and death had been stolen but now acknowledged. This case is a haunting reminder of how appearances can deceive, how evil can hide in plain sight, and how relentless investigative work, modern forensic science, and persistence can finally restore identity to the nameless, even after nearly half a century. The Lady of the Dunes story is a chilling testament to human cruelty, but also, ultimately, to human perseverance. And there you have it, 5 legendary BuzzFeed unsolved cases finally solved, mysteries unraveled, and names restored. Proof that patience, science, and relentless investigation can bring closure even decades later.